morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Labor Day. It is Monday, September 3rd, 2018. I am Dave Biddle. Very happy to be joined by Patrick Murphy. Patrick, the Buckeyes, of course, kicked off their 2018 season with a 77-31 win over Oregon State on Saturday. We'll get into specifics on offense and defense. But just in general, what stood out to you the most, Patrick?
I just think that, I guess the offense would have to be where I'd start. I think that the excitement surrounding the move from J.T. Barrett to Dwayne Haskins and what that would look like is a question we've had and we've speculated on, seen bits and pieces last year of kind of a preview of that. Then we saw the spring game and little bits of spring practice. Finally, on Saturday, we got to see Dwayne Haskins start a game for the Buckeyes and, everything that went in with that. And I think it went, about as good as could be expected and about what people thought it would look like. He was 22 of 30 for 313 yards. That tied that was a record for a new starting quarterback for Ohio State. Also set a record for a new starter with 5 touchdowns. Had the one bad play where he threw the interception when he probably should have either taken a sack or thrown the ball away earlier, but was really good, really efficient. And then, just the players around him. I think that you saw what he can do in terms of making wide receivers better, putting balls on the money, and, it made the offense go. 721 yards, obviously a lot there. 77 points is tied for the most by a team since Urban Meyer took over in 2012. So the biggest thing for me was just the offensive explosion and it looking like what we, should expect, I think, from an Ohio State offense this year with Dwayne Haskins as quarterback and all the weapons he has around him.
Yeah, let's dig deeper into the offense. Obviously, I could not have been more impressed with Haskins. I mean, he wasn't perfect, but he doesn't need to be. He looked the part. I know Oregon State's defense is terrible, but he was putting the ball on the money. But what else about the offense? Anything that concerns you? How do you think the offensive line looked? Just tell me more about this Buckeye offense.
Yeah, the offensive line is certainly a concern of mine. I thought Saturday was really good, which is a positive step. As you said, this is an Oregon State defense that I don't think is going to cause a ton of people problems this year. So I'm not sure how tested this offensive line was. But when you go out there and you play a football team that, is a Power 5 school, has other scholarship players, obviously under a new coach, so these guys are trying to show something, and you give, Dwayne Haskins and even Tate Martell when he was in the game time to throw. There were times when Dwayne was able to sit there and go through all of his progressions. There was room to run, and he was able to sit, and he had the clean pocket for the majority of the game. So that's a positive thing. Obviously, the running game had holes all day. Mike Weber was outstanding, 186 yards, 3 touchdowns, added another touchdown, technically receiving. So, he's a player that a few years ago everyone was excited about. Had a good redshirt freshman year, over 1,000 yards, but last year with the hamstring injury kind of became the forgotten man with J.K. Dobbins, and on Saturday showed, hey, I'm still here, and I'm just as good as J.K., who also had a pretty good day, quietly 74 yards on 15 carries. So, if this offensive line can continue to get better and gel as a group, obviously, you look at the comparison to last year, 4 different guys starting, and so it's going to take some time, I think, but Saturday's performance was good, and the fact that they were able to keep Dwayne and Tate clean for the most part and open up running lanes for the running backs is certainly a positive and will be good going forward.
I'm so impressed with the way Mike Weber looks. I thought coming into the year I was like, well, they're both really good, but Dobbins is better, and he just needs to be the one that gets more carries. If you didn't know any better watching Saturday, you would think that Weber was clearly better.
Right.
So that's a good problem for the Buckeyes to have right there, is Mike Weber's looking better than ever, and we know J.K. Dobbins is a stud too. So they're stacked at the running back position. Brian Snead, I thought, looked good. Master Teague looked good. It was interesting that Snead was in before Teague, but I thought both Snead and Teague looked good. But Snead's clearly ahead of Teague on the depth chart, so they are stacked at running back. All right, looking at defense. Not really stacked other than the defensive line. The defensive line, the first team, and I'm including the top subs other than maybe Chase Young, who I thought did not play well. But the defensive line is as advertised. Nick Bosa. Joey would have done well, too. Nick Bosa, 2 sacks. He recovered a fumble in the end zone for a touchdown. He knocked out the starting quarterback with a hit. Dre'Mont Jones, 2 sacks. He had 1 all of last year. They took him off the field a lot for the Rushman package. That's probably why. But 1 sack all of last year, 2, the other day against Oregon State. But the rest of the defense, I thought, just played poorly. And I know they were without Jordan Fuller, but you can't give up nearly 400 yards to Oregon State. You can't give up 4 long touchdowns to Oregon State. They're going to face exponentially better offenses. And I know Oregon State, Patrick, had a couple guys that were fast. That receiver and that running back who scored, they each scored 2 touchdowns. Those are fast dudes. I get that. They weren't playing an FCS school, but still, the defense needs not just to get better, it has to get way better if Ohio State's going to achieve its goals this year, in my opinion.
Absolutely, I agree. I think we expected more. This is a team that returned a decent amount of their players. Obviously, they are starting 3 new linebackers, but these are guys for the most part that have seen time in games. Malik Harrison started some games last year. Baron Browning's a 5-star kid who played a good amount as a freshman last year. Pete Warner certainly played him last season. Young for sure, but this linebacking group has to get better. And then the secondary, Jeffrey Okudah with the 1 pass interference call, got called for a second one, and I think we both agreed that it was a little iffy, but you've got to clean that up. We saw that a lot with Kendall Sheffield last year. The safeties were certainly an issue. Justin Wint just wasn't up to the challenge, and if he's not up to the challenge against these guys, I can only imagine if he ends up on the field. We don't know how long Jordan Fuller is going to be out with the hamstring injury. If he ends up on the field, say, against TCU, that could be problematic. So defensively, I think that's where you point to, hey, we've got to get better if you're the Buckeyes, and we've got to get better quick. But the good news is now they have it on tape in a live game. You can start to make adjustments that aren't just playing against your own team and, go to the film, show these guys mistakes. It is a young defense in terms of experience, and I think that these will be valuable lessons. Now it's up to the coaching staff to, take them on the practice field and get things cleaned up. We've seen defenses in the past here at Ohio State start off slow, maybe, in 1 or 2 of these early games, give up some points, and then as the year goes on, really start to lock things down. So, I want to believe in this coaching staff. Obviously, there's 2 new coaches on defense in Taver Johnson and Alex Grinch. So, these guys are getting tested, too, in terms of how they will respond to a tough first week. But, I think another thing to take away is that they did have a big layoff at halftime, and, maybe that relaxed some of the guys a little bit. Maybe the game, in their minds was in hand. You don't like to think that, but given the opponent, I could see that potentially happening. I think that, defensively it seemed maybe that was the case, especially for maybe some of the younger guys, the second-string guys. So hopefully they get it cleaned up, and when they face a better opponent, we'll see a defense that can, look like the silver bullets of the past.
I want to switch gears and talk about something that I find very interesting. We know the Urban Meyer story dominated the sports news cycle for the entire month of August. I mean, you couldn't even turn on any sports show, I don't care if it was national or whatever, without it being the lead story. It seemed like every day in August. Maybe not every day, but it seemed like every day, and it was something new almost every day. And it just seemed like it was never going to stop. And listen, I'm not saying it's going away. Don't get me wrong, but I have noticed over the last couple of days specifically that Urban Meyer's story is getting a hell of a lot less publicity now that the games have started. It does seem like it's dying down to some extent. Now, I know that's going to be, brought back up now that he's back with the team and everything. But, am I off base here, Patrick? Have you noticed the same thing? Do you feel like the story is somewhat dying down or no?
I think so, and I think you make a good point with Urban coming back and being able to coach practice starting today, that we're going to hear a little bit about it, but if you watch the game on television, I think a lot of people were pleasantly surprised with how little it was talked about. Greg McElroy, who was on the call, is a guy who was fairly outspoken during this whole thing about his thoughts on what Ohio State did, how they handled the punishment, and they didn't really talk about it all. They stuck to football, which I was happy with, and I think that was a good first step. If those guys who are around the team calling the game can switch the focus to football, I think more and more people will. And just as the season goes on, there's certainly more storylines. people are talking about Michigan's loss and what's going on with Washington and all these other teams, and there's storylines now about who's in the college football playoff race, even though we're only not even completely through week 1. So now that there's other things to talk about, I think there'll be less focus on what's going on at Ohio State, at least off the field, and more focus on things on the field around the country. And that's good. These guys need a bit of a break after kind of taking a beating in the national media's eyes throughout the last month or so. And I think you'll probably start to see that, like you said.
Great stuff from Patrick Murphy. Programming note, Patrick, myself, and Steve Hellwagon, we will be interviewing Ryan Day. Not just the three of us. That'd be great if it was the three of us and just Ryan, but the rest of the media is also going to be there. Maybe we can set that up sometime. Jerry Emig, are you listening, my good friend? But we will interview Ryan Day later today around 11:45 a.m., so keep it locked to Bucknuts for that. We also might get Greg Schiano. Jerry told us if we don't get Schiano today, we'll get him tomorrow. We're also getting players after practice Tuesday and Wednesday, so they're beefing up the media availability this week. So keep it locked to Bucknuts throughout the day for Ryan Day's comments. And thanks again to Patrick Murphy, and thanks to all of you for listening to this show. I appreciate it. Hope you have a great Labor Day. Let's hit a Buckeye swag, best damn band in the land.